This is My Perspective discussion series, where women talk Budo.
It's about in all things.
So when you said just touching back on something you said before about if people are terrified, do you kind of is that easy to recognize, like when to dial it down? Well, I mean, I suppose it is, because even just in class you can kind of notice it, and I was also thinking, I had this realization recently that I don't know if it was a realization, but the thought crossed my mind that that actually maybe sometimes people could be scared of training with me, and it's kind of it was kind of like a difficult thing to process in a way, and but then as a teacher, I'm just somebody in the class, or I'm someone in wherever, taking part in a class, because at the beginning it's always like you kind of you're always, at least when I first started, I felt very much like, oh, I hope I'm not hurting the other person, and that kind of thing. But it wasn't really I didn't really seriously think that the other person could maybe be a bit fearful of training with me. I didn't seriously think that. But it started to cross my mind recently, and as I say, I'm just somebody. I'm not the teacher, and so is it kind of? I mean, I guess you're just. Do you ever think about that? How? I don't know what the question is really. I
think you're actually answering some of your own question there. That yes, people, you got to work with each person as they go along, but you can tell, even without contact, you can tell when someone is maybe too scared, and you got to bring that down. But I don't believe that in all the years that I've known you guys, and going much further back, that there's ever been a class where you could call it terrifying, where people are there. I run a very different ship than the one that I came from. I mean, and to give you a couple of examples of one of my last visits to San Diego, but way back in the mid 90s, I was sitting and watching a weapons class, and I think I was going to go out for a drink with Chiba Sensei afterwards, so I just arrived sitting and watching. And there's a fellow who I remembered when I was there training there regularly. He was a lovely guy. He was from Brooklyn, and I was surprised to see him in the weapons class. But I suppose it's usually by invite, so I suppose he was asked. And there he was facing Chiba Sensei, and there's Chiba Sensei in front of him. And there's the fella holding his bokken upside down. I might have told you this story.
I do remember.
Yeah. That's not unusual in itself, but it was the face. He was paralyzed. He was scared, really, really scared. And see that the trouble with Chiba Sensei, whether it's intent, whether he enjoys affecting people that way or not. It's we can all dig into this, but whichever approach you take, his presence is who he is, and he's not going to undo that. That is the brand, if you want, that's standing there. And this poor fellow was out of his depth. And my own personal assessment of it was very, very simple. I thought these two individuals should not be in the same room. There's this adage that Aikido is for everyone. It's good for everyone. I've never bought into it. I want to believe,
so this rhetoric, or this kind of, I see a lot on a lot of Aikido forums and whatnot online. This question always comes up of does Aikido need to change in order to get more people involved? Like there's kind of this need to make it bigger and involve lots and lots of people, and that's something I don't quite understand.
Change it to what? What do they want? And usually, if you're diluting it, which I assume that's what it would become, or they'll believe it's equal because they will believe that, oh yes, but we don't have to do this, but we'll bring other qualities to it. My guess is that what you're looking for probably already exists out there. And so why do Aikido? Go and do those things. Why you keep on trying to change the thing that you love and enjoy so much, and that you're prepared to put your time in, with all the the inherent risk that comes with it. It doesn't make sense. You have to embrace it for what it is and take from that pool what you can. No one will take the whole lot, and I include myself in that. No one can. It's too big. You take what you can, and you go off and work on that, rather than picking and choosing. You already used that earlier. Picking and choosing the safe stuff, you could say, and then the fear element is gone, and then you made it comfortable. Would it make Aikido grow and develop more? I don't know. It's not, as you realise, it's not an area that I get into. So,
I mean, coming back to the story about the student that you knew being faced with Chiba Sensei in a weapons class. Fran and I were talking yesterday about how weapons heightens this. I wouldn't say just it doesn't just heighten the fear factor. It heightens everything. Actually, and as you pointed out, and as I discover more and more. Anything that's present in your Aikido is like times 10 in weapons, including the fear factor. I mean, I'm sure Fran, you'll agree with me that I don't know how much I want to admit this really, but like whenever Sensei, you call me up for weapons ukemi, it's always scary.
Good. Yeah. And you know what's interesting? I'm not trying to scare you.
No,
I'm not trying to scare anybody. I'm just doing what I know and try to. I know what to look for, and also I recognize when something different is happening. That is like, oh, this is new, and try to keep myself open to that. So it's not always set, and which is why it moves. But we have to have a general structure, framework, having said that. But yes, I don't actually set out to scare people. It's just something that I obviously absorb, part of my personality, it seems, and I try to never use it negatively. I just feel like I'm doing my job. This is my work. This is how I believe it should be done.
Yeah. So one of the questions that I raised right at the very, very beginning of this conversation was, should you fear your teacher? And my intuition is that perhaps you should, in the same way that a child will fear their parents, but trust them as well. You can't, obviously, if a child is terrified of their parents, that's a very bad thing and shouldn't happen. But you should, I think your parents should have a fear factor, because your parents are responsible for disciplining you and teaching you right from wrong, teaching you what's dangerous. You should. I mean, you shouldn't want to be in trouble with your parents in that sense, but at the same time, you should trust them. And
respect is what you're talking about, and a big component of respect is love, isn't it? It's so a child should respect their parents, and so and fear does come into it. But I mean, I was always scared of Chiba Sensei, but I was cheeky as well. I mean, I'm not shy of saying that. I was quite capable of getting carried away a little bit, and sometimes would pay the price for it. See, the sirens have come for me for being so naughty in those days. But I need a line as well, not to cross it. There's various reasons, and one of them is he's the teacher. You can't, once that line is broached, either the relationship is changed to something else, most positively a friendship, or you've lost. It's gone, and once that's gone, almost impossible, if not impossible, to recapture. And both sides are damaging each other's relationship. You've got to have that separation. And yet we talk about connection all the time. So you connect, and yet there's space as well. It's a very quite a sophisticated process that's going on that has to be kept as long as it can. I agree with that. I mean, is this a lot to do with what you're saying?
I think so. I think so. There's like you say, it's in a sense it's full of contradiction.
The whole thing.
It's full of opposites.
Yeah.
Full of yin and yang.
How often have I said someone is explaining something and does that make sense? And oh yes, it makes completely sense. And then usually if it makes sense, then it probably is not right. because it might make sense for that moment or for a particular point, maybe a physical, technical correction. But in terms of encapsulating the art and how you function and work within it, it doesn't make sense at all. It's very difficult. You learn something and something you've all noticed, and it's in a way how you started the podcast. The danger of it becoming set, which is stroke, taking it for granted. You're taking me taking you for granted, you're taking me for granted. I'm always there. It's very easy to go that route. I don't really give people room to do that. But if anyone tries, they'll think, it's not the right thing to do, and it will get addressed. It means vigilance. It means keeping on top of it all, because it'll be a shame and an awfully sad to lose the quality that allows. So we will have to play our part. It's a bit of Shakespeare there, isn't there? We all got a stage, the world's the stage. Well, the tatami is in this case. So yes. Fran, you're smiling. You got something to say?
Yes. No. I'm thinking we've mentioned in the past episodes about like the culture that exists in each dojo, and connecting that to the thought that Cathy was explaining of there's the possibility that someone is scared of training with Cathy or with someone else in the mat. And the third thing being how a teacher manages this fear factor while working with their students. That permeates to the whole culture, right? Because maybe if a teacher relies too much on keeping on maybe resorting to oppression, like you said, it was very interesting that you mentioned that to ascertain their authority, to show that they are strong or whatever, then the senpais will repeat that and so on. And there's the risk of creating in my opinion, like a very toxic environment, or that environment that maybe is not, if you don't have the skills, or not the skills, but the personality, the way you are, that allows you to process that in a good way. Yeah, I think it's very important to think of those things.
I think we're all different. If you have a class, I mean, the classes have grown, as you know, quite a few of them are getting mainly pretty full these days, and there's all sorts there, and there will be more all sorts as time goes by, and liking each other is a bonus. It's when you think it's desirable that a dojo has a glue that creates this energy, this spirit that people are picking up on when they arrive. New people, for example. But the fact that everyone can get on with each other, or certain people have got certain moods, depending on how far that goes, of course, and use the word toxic. It's a fine line, and this brings me to a beginner you mentioned about how they changed in mood or tone, and you weren't sure what it is. I never claim to be correct either. It could be that I've dealt with that incorrectly. It's sometimes your enthusiasm to help someone actually ends up becoming the thing that puts them off,
freaks them out,
and scares them. You're not trying to freak them out. My job and something that I'm very good at is to see the potential in people, the possibility in people. Whether they want that themselves or whether they see that in themselves is another thing. And so you're coming one end. In the end, you've heard me say this again, it's up to that person. You cannot make someone go through the loop. That has to come from them. Sometimes it's hot, cold. That's a beginner. That's someone who's working through. Other people that you may not get on with. It depends on how bad that is. And sometimes, when I think about San Diego, there's a lot of people that you're not going to click with, possibly the majority, and it's quite possible the majority don't click with each other either. It's people form their own little groups, and whether how functional that is, and how good that is, and how much you're prepared to tolerate, and how much are you prepared to give someone a chance, and if they're naughty and off, that's all down to the teacher and down to the policy, I suppose, of the dojo. And so it is complicated. We don't have a big setup. It's not like we've got a couple of hundred people there, but there's a culture, isn't there? There is definitely like a mindset that is not negative. It's mainly positive, and that you got to work with for the betterment and improvement of your own training.
Yes, just one small point. Yes, because what I felt from our dojo is that, for example, before in other places where I trained, sometimes I would have been scared of training with shodans or with people with higher rank, and here the fear factor has been the usual thing from Aikido, like to be able to enjoy it and to take ukemi and all that. But I've never felt that, or very few times felt that I am actively avoiding someone because I'm scared. And that's something that I really like about training in the dojo, for example, and it's part of the culture, I'd say.
Yeah, I think you got to be challenged, and your seniors will challenge you, and they'll make you a little bit nervous. But that's the envelope, as it's been pushed. And I'll also give you this. Sadly and recently, Yamada Sensei passed away, and in one of his posts from a few years back before lockdown, he was talking about certain types of people who come into Aikido who talk about 5 people with a jo attacking you and you throwing them blindfolded, and silly things really, and at least I think it was him, and but other attitudes that come into in the world of Aikido, and he has no respect for them. He was very clear. He said these people who come to Aikido are scared of going to the more competitive martial arts like judo or karate or jiu-jitsu, for example. So they're scared of engaging with people that brings out that side in them, and they come to Aikido because they believe Aikido is the safe one, because they want a martial art that makes them feel comfortable and not threatened. And
due to the lack of competition?
Partly because in competition you don't know what the other guy's going to do. You don't know how much stronger, how much more technically competent. The chess mind, the chess player in there. So that's definitely a factor, and you could get hurt. It's back to that again, and something that you're prepared to live with. They want to come to Aikido, and they bring that. Now, some people will come to that, and it's okay. Not everyone's there to push the envelope, but when it becomes the dominant crowd, when it takes over the whole thing, whilst the other groups are keeping the fiery characters, you could say, then Aikido loses. It loses that element that makes it,
rather than everyone interacting and training together.
Yeah. Something like that. I agreed with him constantly with that side of it. And again, I mean, you look at the background they came from. A lot of these guys were second, third dan in judo by the time they're 18, 19 years old. When they or karate or kendo, when they got into Aikido, it was the Budo of choice after the other stuff. But was it an easy ride? My goodness, no. It's and times have changed. We're not talking about going back to the 50s and the 60s. We have to move on. But how much are you going to abandon? And when it's really, for all intents and purposes, no longer Aikido, I think that's a very important thing to consider. It's not me, but I'm not 25, not 35 anymore. So it's you guys. So they're scared of you a little bit. I'd be quite pleased with it.
Fran, I'm just thinking, you have so of the two of us, since Fran and I have been working together, we've discovered that Fran is the more organized of the two of us. And I'm thinking, do you happen to have the questions in front of you? Because I know that there were a few things we wanted to cover.
Yes, but I think, Cathy, that we have covered most of them.
We've covered all of them.
Not all.
Perhaps bar one.
The one about different people, how to.
Yeah, and I suppose we can't kind of brush over the fact that Fran and I made this the tagline of this podcast, of this program, I guess, is Women Talk Budo. And so of course we have to include a question about gender. And have you, well, we don't have to, but we want to, so do you find, and I think Fran, if this comes into that question that you're talking about, in the sense that do you find that women tend to be more scared than men, or men or not, or that it manifests differently? Fran, did you want to add to that? Because I know that there was more to that question.
No, yeah, we were. I think that the way we thought the question was. Wasn't too different from what you're saying. It was more like, how does the fear factor, or the way you deal with fear as well, how does that change depending on the characteristics of the person, in this case gender, for example. But we also know that it changes with experience and the age of the person as well.
It's an interesting question. I mean, I can't answer for women, really. I don't know what it's like to be a woman and be on that side of things. But I'll give you a couple of stories. I wrote about this quite a while back. There used to be this chap who used to visit San Diego in my early days, and he was built like he was a unit. He was a refrigerator, basically, and he wasn't very good, but he was immensely powerful, and he didn't mind using that with no distinction between, forget about gender, between any individual. He treated everybody the same. So there's
in terms of power, and
just a constant of I'd say a bully, actually, and
right.
I noticed in one class one day where he was dominating this woman who was probably half his weight, a quarter of his strength and half his weight. She was not comfortable. She was nervous, but more than nervous, frustrated, because it's never just fear. I mean, one of the things I mentioned earlier, that for sometimes fear, the fear factor is way up on the Richter scale. Speaking for myself. But probably bigger than the fear was the excitement and just the sheer, you're hooked on it. It's like a drug. So they came together. The other side is frustration. There could be fear and frustration that this idiot is not giving you any consideration. Basically, look, your technique is not working, blah 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 blah. But let's be real. When you've got someone where the strength discrepancy is so large, to block and stop someone is very easy, regardless of what their level is. And so he's using these physical tools, not his mental tools, his physical tools to stop the other person. Chiba Sensei yelled and told him to get on with it, or I'm going to come over and I'm going to show you. And now the guy had history with him back in England. So this is going back into the 70s in London now. And so I don't know what he experienced with him back in London, but I guess he misbehaved once or twice, and he found out what thunder and lightning was about, and that stayed with him, because once that word came out, and I was so glad he did, it was menacing. This is not the actor, this is not the showman, this is not the charismatic teacher. This is the warrior who's I'm going to come after you, and it's not going to be fun. And it's not going to be stimulating. It's not going to be stimulating. And the guy suddenly was as light as a feather, and he was cooperating with the woman, collaborating, working with her. Too much. It was like, and he would go over dramatic, overdoing it completely from a complete. But
there was no middle
bonehead, complete leaf in the wind. And I was glad. I thought, good for you, boss. This is all I could think of. And I looked over, and my feeling was, these guys never know what fear is, and the girls discover it very, very early in the process, primarily because of the physical difference, the strength, the speed, the strength, the power, and not necessarily aptitude, and not necessarily the ability. And let's face it, we are non-competitive. We are all asked to work together to try and bring out as the best out of each other as we can. So there's call that the spiritual dimension, if you wish. But it doesn't take a rocket scientist that a guy that weighs 105 kilograms is stopping a 55 kilogram woman whose muscle tone is nothing like his, and is blocking her. Leave her alone, you bully. So when Chiba Sensei did that, now you know what it's like. Now, and the big, strong guys who teach around the world, who are they may not be as bad as that, but they're in a situation where they've never been put in a place where you're scared, and they lose, and they actually lose out. Their Aikido reflects it. It's the pardon me. It's speaking for myself. I was 65 kilograms. I was tiny. I was a waif. I was a boom, boom, boom. The speed, the energy, and a lot of that was adrenaline, supplied by me, supplied by others, and just the energy between me and Chiba Sensei always seemed to fire things up, mainly constructively. It was quite a sort of a fantastic experience. Yes, there was negative, there was dark, but overall it was a positive experience, and but it took that sort of energy that both provided to do that, and I was scared. That was part of the journey, and part of the experience. And so I was forceful. I wanted to be effective. There was never anything malicious in the way I taught. It got close, and some people would pick up on that, but picking up on that, the darker side of your nature, and we do have it. There's no getting around that either. Reaching that point and crossing that point to malicious damage and implementing that is a completely different thing. You could use, to a degree, you can use that for positive improvement. It's not all going to be fun. That's the other side of it. It's not all going to be, this was the greatest class I've ever had, the most wonderful thing. It's not, and you're all sort of realizing that. And I'd say life in general isn't like that either. So coming back to this guy, these guys, I call them boneheads because they you got their shoulders are my legs. They don't fear until they come across someone who scares them, who terrifies them, and they are probably more terrified than you would be, because you're dealing. One, he would, and I too know how to deal with someone who's nowhere near your level of experience and training and the caliber that you've attained. They have to take the steps towards that. Your job is to assist. These guys are the other way around. They are blocking and they are stopping that. They simultaneously scare the other person. They frustrate them. Sometimes they terrify them if they're abusive that way, versus someone is using part psychology, part physical, part X factor to stimulate, get something going that way. So when they get scared, because it's rarely that happens to them. They're not terrified. They're not, and when it happens, the needle just shoots up. And
just the simple fact that it doesn't happen anywhere near as frequently.
No, they're dull to it. They've been numb to it. And, whereas you don't have that exposure. You're immediately aware of your mortality, I suppose. Your fragility is a
self-preservation.
Isn't that like ukemi? Isn't that training? Is that holy Moses? This is scary. A gal can get hurt here, and it's like, yes, wake up, don't get hurt. And if you follow that, and you have that about you, you're probably going to be all right. It's the vast majority. You're going to be all right. Is when you don't observe it. Another thing you heard me say: it takes one incident. Fran, it was one accident, not the 1,000 you did. And landed okay. A couple of dodgy ones here and there, but it's the one that breaks the collarbone, that tweaks the shoulder, that tweaks the elbow, etc. So you have to throw yourself in, and let's face it, we've got an unspoken form that we all sign up when we walk through that door. All of us. A pun intended. Who's twisting your arm to come to class? No, nobody. Who's twisting my arm? Who twisted my arm to go and train under this formidable individual and stay all that time? Nobody. It was your own choice, your own acceptance that there's an element of danger involved, and don't fall asleep on that. Is what I would say. And you've seen a couple of people who've come and gone who are sleepers. They're not with it, and then you got to help them. You got to deal with that, and whether they cross that line or not is up to them. You can't force that on them. Maybe you can push it close, which is that forcing. Maybe an element of that there. You take it there and see how they respond. So there's a sort of a laboratory type of mentality as well to see how they respond. And if they take well to it, it's like, wow, then you're onto something. And if they don't take onto that, that's not. That usually self decisions go on there. They'll probably leave or say not for me. But I think I've covered quite a bit there. So
yes, no.
Is this 2 episodes?
It might be, yeah. It might make 2 episodes, especially because we do have one last question. I think that we Fran.
Shoot for it.
Why do you do Aikido, Sensei?
I was asked that just recently. Donovan, who's sadly left us for personal reasons, and he
student, yeah.
Remember him? The really nice guy.
Yes,
during the summer. And I think, in a way, he already knew the answer just from the way I conduct myself. And he said, "You don't do this for business, do you? There's a business component to all this, but it's not why you do it." And I said, "No. So why do you do it?" And I said, "Well, it's such a long time since I've been doing it, and maintain my enthusiasm for it." I think. I was saying to somebody, is it for you? Somebody said it has to be for you. And what does that mean? And it's not an easy question to answer, and it takes time as the years go by, and it changes as well. That if it's no longer that, then what has replaced it? And that big transition has been a couple of them: leaving England for Chiba Sensei, leaving Chiba Sensei for England, leaving formal organizations and moving on in my own direction. And but there was always something that carried with it, and it's initially the absolute love for it. And when I say love, I don't mean fun and enjoyment. Even you could be tough lessons, unpleasant lessons, but it's like, I never thought of leaving. I never thought of it. Never put me off, no matter how extreme. I always turned up with enthusiasm. And the early days were quite rough and tumble, and so they should have been as well. I think if it wasn't, I probably wouldn't have stayed with it. And then something else I said to him, and I said, I guess I'm martial. Or martial enough. Certainly not like Chiba Sensei or any of those guys, but martial enough that I'm doing something that tickles it. It spikes it, it gets it going, and so that's part of your identity. And so you're affirming that identity rather than negating it, saying, "Yeah, I am like this," and you're not quite sure what that means. That takes time as well. And when I eventually did go to San Diego, I knew that I went to somebody who knew his onions, to put it simply, to put it mildly, and he drew that out. He spotted that. The joke was by some of my friends over there that he saw you walking off the plane and right, grab him, want him. And metaphorically speaking, it's true. He did. That was his job. If you see someone that you think has got certain qualities, you go for it. And then, of course, I had a choice to make, but I will stick with it. And it was just, I don't know what it was. I wasn't phased out. I wasn't even. I've had some very, very serious low points in it, as many do. But to stop, it wasn't a factor. So I think it, I think the fact that it's non-competitive is also a factor. I'm not competitive. It's hard to believe, I know. So what drives you to excel? What drives you to go improve and move on and on? So what does that mean versus non-competitive? I can become competitive if pushed and challenged. Depends on what it is. It's some things that I'm challenged on that don't interest me. There's a contrary part to me where I'll show you, I'll prove to you that I can do it. And it barely lasts these days minutes or seconds. It's like you start off doing the thing that you've been challenged to do, only to realize that you don't really want to do it. You're not interested in it, so that it drops away. It's not in, I'm not bloody minded enough to just do it just for the hell of it, to show you that I can. But the things that I do choose to do, there's something about getting better, improving, and I think Chiba Sensei in that respect gave me the tools to do that. That would be bigger than any other achievement, when you've got the means to achieve what is needed for the art you've got, and I've tried to do my best in that way. And so it's always kept me busy. It's always kept me tuned that way. It kept me youthful as well. It keeps you young. And there's a second. Well, I think I've covered more than two factors there, but there's a big factor that involves the two of you and other people. I enjoy teaching. There's something, it's frustrating. It can be maddening, tiring. Oh God, not Ikkyo again, not going to class again, not this again. But I always come back to the beginning. And that beginner's mind, you've heard that term used, Shoshin, the more strictly Buddhist term for it. I think as you know, I've got my own podcast series, which I haven't done in nearly a couple of years now, and I don't really listen to them anymore. And the thing that highlights all of them, especially when you consider that it was just before COVID, I think that when they began and they accelerated during COVID, during the lockdown, was enthusiasm. That enthusiasm, the energy. So whether they're technically correct or not, I'm not that bothered, really. It's read between the lines, I think, is the element there. And probably these podcasts that you're going to do, there's a lot of read between the lines, and hopefully who's listening can pick up on something that isn't said directly. And so I enjoy teaching, and when I see someone pick it up and work something out, I get a lot of enjoyment out of that. It's just I like to see people do well, and so there's a teacher in there somewhere. So and it's not unlike you, Cathy, a real teacher who's walked away from teaching for the time being, maybe forever. Well,
teaching music.
Yeah, but still, I'll leave you with this on that note. I love history. You probably noted it. I studied it in school, and my history teacher was a very interesting man. He taught it not as just dates and events and names. He taught it as a very living thing, a passionate thing. He and there's one other staff member in my school in the sciences where they made it come alive, because academics can be so dry. And it's like, and what on earth does this have to do with anything with us today? And I can see why it can become that way, but not with these guys. They attain two things: giving you a passion for the subject, that it affects us all, and it continues to affect us all, because the human condition essentially hasn't changed. There was that, and the other one is that how you can influence a maybe tiny little nudge of something better through teaching. That is not music or Aikido per se, but the Aikido and music and whatever else the subject is the vehicle towards that end. And maybe that's the Buddhist overlap that a lot of Budo does have. Aikido certainly does have it. And so I think all of that is sort of plays up there. I hope I haven't said too much.
No, I mean, I guess
stop sometimes.
I guess all we can say is that we're glad that you do, because obviously we reap the benefits of it, and just lastly, thinking about what you just said about your history teacher, who kind of brought the thing alive rather than just like the facts and the dates and the figures. I remember, I don't know if you actually remember saying this, but by the time this podcast is released, I may already be in Japan, actually. So what people watching might not know is that my husband and I are going to Japan for an unspecified time. We don't really know. And of course, in my mind, I'm thinking, what can I'm quite conscious of the fact that obviously I'm not going to have you as my daily teacher for a while at least. And I just remembered something that you said, that was that if when the time comes that I go off somewhere, the thing that I have to take with me is not the form. I remember you said the form is easy, and I remember thinking, I don't think the form is easy, but but anyway, you said the form is easy, but it's the feel of it that you have to try to that you have to take, and that's the thing that you have to take with you. So I certainly will try.
but you can't get the feeling without the form. So it's a silly thing to say, really. They are. You need both. But But yes, I'm aware you're going. And of course I am. And I think sometimes space is a good thing. Back to this thing of freshness. It's Philip was here recently from Cologne, and he's dealing with training in two very different ways. And the only advice I could give him was not to be stuck with one way or the other, which ironically is what I'm trying to do with the people who regularly hear. Don't get stuck with it, because it becomes the presentation becomes the message rather than what feeds it, what's behind it. And you got to find what's behind you when you're doing your thing. And so maybe a bit of space can do that. Be flexible. I remember Rodrigo, another student in the South Coast now. I asked him what he would do. This is, of course, quite a few years back. If he was elsewhere, he actually said that he'd find another system of training. If he couldn't find the caliber of Aikido, he would find the caliber of Judo, and that's keeping a feel. It may not be exactly the same, but it's keeping that part of you going still, that's the feel, I suppose, in a different form or shape. But you're keeping something in you alive and going that way. And if you're destined to come back and train and take it from there, then that's going to happen in its own time. But I'd enjoy myself in Japan. I would if I was in. No, how can you go? You must stay, and there's a long way to go. But no.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we really, really appreciate you coming on here. I've found it fascinating. I think. I'm sure that hopefully the people listening will find it interesting as well. Fran, any final words at all?
No, I think that I was a bit absorbed by the conversation. It was very, very interesting, and it's really that we started from this from fear, and we've opened so many branches. So I've learned a lot actually.
Thank you very
Absolutely.
much, and have a
Thank
nice.
you very much, and we'll
Thanks
see
for
you.
inviting.
We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to My Perspective, where women talk Budo.